So welcome to the Healthy Functioning Feet workshop. We're going to spend the next 90 minutes together, first understanding a little bit about the mechanics of feet and getting a bit of a visual. Obviously, we know where feet are on our body, but a little bit more of an inside view into feet. And then we're going to talk about some of the ways that integrated into our lives, we can actually work to maintain or improve the functionality of our feet. So the feet are a really interesting structure. I find them just fascinating. Each foot has 28 bones and 30 joints and more than 100 muscles and tendons and ligaments. And they're all working together to provide support and balance and mobility. I find the feet are one of the most versatile parts of the body because we need them for both mobility and locomotion and stability and structure. And it's also the only part of the body where our vertical plane meets the horizontal surface of the world. So we ask a lot of our feet. Not only are they supporting all of the weight of the body, but we also need them to be dynamic and mobile in order for us to be able to function in any sort of movement. So we need them to do fine movements, rather fine skills like maintaining balance, which is this sort of ever-changing feedback structure. And we also need them to deal with gravity, deal with the pressure of the weight on it, like our body's weight, and the way that we move. So they're just kind of always working. And we don't often pay that much attention to them, again, unless we have pain or dysfunction. And so one of the things that I'm hearing more and more in the movement world, I may not be the first person that you're hearing this from. One of the ways that we really don't do our feet much justice or don't support them in the way that we could is whenever we develop foot dysfunction, whether that's plantar fasciitis or bunions or hammer toe or what have you. Typically, the typical treatment for that or prevention even of that is more support. So something like an insole, or an orthopedic shoe, or some sort of other bracing. And I think there is a place for those tools because in my opinion, all movement is good movement. So what if it means that before you couldn't even stand and now you're able to go for a walk, that's amazing. But I know the pattern that I tend to see with my clients is they start with an insole or a orthopedic shoe, and it's sort of this like snowball effect, and they need a different one. They need more support. It seems like it's kind of like a lock and key. You have an insole, and then you have it for life. And then it becomes that they can't take off their shoes just for a few minutes. They wake up in the morning and they put their shoes on. And I certainly am not suggesting if you have relied on your insole for like 24 hours, but rather 100% of your waking hours. And that I'm not suggesting that you take off the insole. And the journey to rehabilitating the feet is really going to start with allowing them to regain the full movement in their potential. So imagine that I broke my arm, and then I cast my arm, and the bone heals, and then they take the cast off. And that arm is a little weaker. I might have a little bit of discomfort as I'm developing strength in the arm again and full mobility in the arm again. But the goal is not, the goal is to maintain or regain the functionality that I had pre-break. For some people, when they wear the orthotics or the really heavily insoled shoes, it's as though they're casting their feet and just keeping the cast on for the rest of their lives. And so, yes, the cast allows them, a broken bone is painful. The issue that they were dealing with was painful, but without the cast, the issue is still present. And the longer that we're wearing that binding, the more we're creating different types of problems. So the foot, not only is it very adaptable to the world around us in terms of balance and so on, but it's also the first point in our body where it's telling the rest of the structure what to expect. So it's telling, with a free moving foot, it's telling the rest of the structure that, that there's a little bit of instability in the inner part of the foot. Like, the ground is squishy, the ground is hard, we're moving downhill and we're moving uphill. So being able to have your ankle moving freely and having that full sensation along the bottom of the foot is really important to sort of cue up the rest of the body what needs to happen. Because the function of the foot has a lot to do with the health, and the function of the knee has a lot to do with the health and the function of the hips, which have a lot to do with the health and the function of the spine, shoulders, neck. It's all one thing. Therefore, the healthy function of the shoulders have an effect on the spine, the hips, the knees, the ankles, etc. So it's I find that we don't spend a lot of time in our movement practices focusing on just the feet. It's kind of just like taken for granted that everybody will come to stand, that everybody will balance, that everybody will, and so on. But we don't take a lot of time to actually work to engage those muscles of the feet, those several muscles of the feet, the joints of the feet. So I'm going to show you a couple of pictures to help us get a visual here on what it is that we're talking about, especially if you haven't ever studied like the anatomy. So this is the muscles of the feet, and mostly here I'm talking about the superficial muscles. So you can see that muscles of the leg and the ankle are often associated with muscles of the feet. And it's very easy to understand how, for example, if you were to do a squat, how the feet are involved in that big movement. So basically, anytime that you're working muscles around your hips or muscles around your knees, you're also working the muscles of the ankles and the feet. What's less commonly sort of focused on are what's called the intrinsic muscles of the foot. So extrinsic muscles of the foot are those that connect from your foot to another part of your leg. And those muscles are usually more used or more well understood in people than the intrinsic muscles of the foot. And the intrinsic muscles of the foot are those that exist just within the foot. And this is why the only way that we can engage with or build the intrinsic muscles of the foot, the plantar intrinsic, as they're sometimes called, is by having the foot itself move, which is why it's so challenging when we heavily brace or orthotic the foot, because we're really turning off those intrinsic muscles and relying on this external support. So the first picture on the far right, the 1, 2, 3, that's the bottom of your foot, like what's making contact with the ground, looking up. 4 and 5, you're still looking like the bottom of your foot looking up. It's a deeper layer than the first. If you peeled 1, 2, and 3 away, then you would reveal these 4 and 5. And those are like connect the heel to your to the digits of the toes. And then 6, 7, A and B, and 8, those are toes to other toes. And you can see there's kind of an independent moving big toe, but the other 4 toes are somewhat connected. It would be difficult to move those independently of the others, completely independently of the others. 9, you can see towards the outer edge, and 10 is 10 and 11. So if you visualize these muscles in your feet, as you wiggle your toes, as you clench the toes, as you stretch them wide without moving your ankle or the leg, you can kind of feel some of these muscles starting to engage. And I know that these are not muscles that we often engage with, because when I do work in my yoga classes or with private clients, specifically, I focus on intrinsic muscles of the feet when I do, because as we do other movements, I know that they're working extrinsic muscles. So when we focus on feet, we really focus on intrinsic. And often people get cramps, and because these muscles are just not used to being targeted in the way that we're asking them to. So regaining the function of these intrinsic muscles is not only going to improve our balance, but it can also, I've also worked with a lot of athletes that it's improved their skill. It allows them to jump higher, it allows them to run faster, it allows them to move with less pain because they're using their feet for the spring-like function they're intended. So something that's really interesting that I find really interesting about the feet is people kind of think of the feet. Let me see if I can find a good picture that demonstrates this. But people, oh, this is a good one. So people kind of imagine the foot like as though the leg bone is sitting on top of your heel bone. But you can see from this picture here, as your leg bone comes down, the fibula and the tibia come down, they're actually, the whole weight of your body is actually positioned right over your arch. And so in fact, you're kind of floating. This buoyancy and this tensegrity ought to exist in your foot. That yes, of course, the toes and the heels are touching, and this is the bottom of your foot, so like the tissues actually are touching, but structurally, the weight of your body is over top of this spring-like structure. And it's by rehabilitating or maintaining our intrinsic muscles of the feet that we actually create that arch. The arch itself does not exist without, it's created by musculature of your feet, intrinsically to your feet. And so what I often see as people lose that musculature and that natural spring is everything gets a little heavier, a little harder, and a little more pain. Even high-level athletes can have dysfunctional feet because sometimes if you look, and again, I think there's a trend that's moving more to like a natural footwear, but like if you look at very expensive athletes' shoes, like basketball shoes or something, some of them are like incredibly insoled. It doesn't have to be like a prescription insole. Just look at the actual sole of the feet. They almost have like a heel at the back as they come down to the front. And all of those small shifts happening at the foot level make a big difference. And then that doesn't even move towards what's happening at the hip level and what's happening at the knee level, because I find a lot of people have habitual postural habits that heavily affect the function of their feet. So we're going to talk about and integrate all of this information today. And most importantly, I want you to walk away with some kind of like, it's almost like a new lens of awareness of your feet, and ways without taking any more time out of your day that you can actually work on a fully functional foot. So I'm looking at this picture once again. The reason why I originally pulled it up is this is looking at the outer, or what's called the lateral side of your foot, and the inner or the medial side of your foot. And these green little like strips, those are ligaments. So ligaments are thick tissues, fibrous tissues. You can think of them almost like your, what are those things called that are like in a building and stabilize the building? Like a weight-bearing wall. You can think of them like weight-bearing walls that connect bone to bone. So they're very, very thick elastic. So they do have a little bit of flexibility to them, but unlike muscles, they are not elastic and tensile. Their main function is tensile. They do have an elastic quality because otherwise they'd be like a bone, and if you were to move ever so slightly in or out towards the inner side, like if our ankle pivoted inwards or outwards, they would snap. So they do have some elastic quality. But the intention of a ligament is to be tensile. They're meant to maintain structure. A lot of times in a practice, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but I wanted you to have this visual. When people don't have mobility in the hips, what I see is them compensating with the ankle. So imagine somebody coming into lotus pose, for example, where they're crossing their leg over their leg. If their hip doesn't have that mobility, their ankle will be like torqued in a really funny way and pulling or putting strain on these ligaments here. And you can see the medial side of the foot, there's these kind of three big, thick, strappy ligaments that really cover the joint of the ankle. There's very little free space in there. With the outer or the lateral side of the foot, they're smaller and there is a lot more free space. And of course, as we know from just our own lives, I'm sure, if you're ever to roll your ankle, I don't think I've ever heard of anyone rolling their ankle inwards. It's always rolling their ankle outwards because there is structural support, but not as much structural support on the outwards. And that's important to know when we're trying to either rehabilitate from an ankle roll or what tends to happen with clients I see is they've rolled their ankle and then they roll it again and they roll it again and they roll it again and again and again because they really lose that structure. So I showed you this one, I showed you this one, and this ankle joint. And this is, although the resolution isn't great, this is another example of the issue with footwear. So we talked about overly supportive, and this is actually talking about, so this is a relatively, yes, it's shoe shaped, but it's relatively minor. Imagine like the very pointy soled shoes. And then look at what happens, not just to the toes. I mean, we've all seen people whose toes look like this. I mean, more as we age, I'm sure our toes look more and more like this. But then what happens to the actual bone, at a bone level, what happens? And then beyond that, it doesn't even show what's happening at the tissue level. So this is another reason why I really encourage people to start to slowly transition as much as possible to free form. So if you're working with someone or if you yourself is very used to a heavily insoled foot, the first thing I tell them is anytime you're at rest, sitting at your desk, watching TV, you're not actually standing on your feet to take off those insoles so that at least we can work on that ability to breathe. And this is not just for people who wear insoles, but also people who wear combat boots, for example, or steel-toed boots, or high-heeled shoes, any sort of a shoe that's restricting. And then I try to encourage them to kind of balance the amount of time that they spend in a shoe like that. So when we take away, the first thing is to regain like the shape of the foot. So when you take away that load, you're at very low risk of actually injuring yourself. And then these are toe spreaders. So if you don't have a place that you can order these, you can always contact me and I can get them to you because we sell them. This is a brand called Joya Toes, and they actually go between each toe, and they're made of kind of a silicone material. It's washable. And they come in two sizes, so the smaller size, and then they come in a larger size if you've already been working. But the intention is to regain that shape, the natural shape of the foot. So if your foot is used to being bound in this inward shape, this is kind of finding it outward. And it's really interesting. I find I tend to be barefoot as much as possible, but even that, we're being barefoot on flat floors, right? I'm not often barefoot outside. I do try as much as possible to be barefoot outside, but because of the cities that we live in, that's less and less safe. So being barefoot as much as possible without creating more pain is ideal. Being barefoot outside has incredible benefits. And when you're not able to do those things, then you can work to rehabilitate the feet using something like this. I've had clients recreate this type of thing. I know they look similar to the things we use for toes, like painting your toes, but they are a little bit different in that they're actually made for like spreading the toes. So you would need to find something. They are quite thick. I don't know if you can tell, but they're at least as thick as my finger and then Of course, the big toe one is probably as thick as my thumb. And I find even when I put these on, it almost feels like my feet are getting a little bit of a massage, like circulation increases. They feel like they're kind of like, a little breath of fresh air. And that's something that you could do anywhere. The second thing that you can do, and is really important, is to actually work on the toe spreading itself. So I'm going to transition to my mat. So I can't get you that close to me because it's a fixed computer, but I'm going to do my absolute best. Maybe I'll just like put my foot up on my desk, which is kind of gross. And nope, hold on, I'll get there. Just put it on a couple blocks. So you actually can work on spreading the toes, because like it's great if you have a tool like the toe spreaders, but even better is if you can do that on your own. So anytime that you take your shoe off, whether it's like a shoe that you're wearing, sorry, I was walking barefoot, a shoe that you're wearing outside in the world, or like a very bound shoe, you can work to spread your toes and relax, to spread your toes, just like you could spread your fingers. And that's something I find really helpful. You could do this right now. Start with 1 foot at a time. Spread your fingers while you spread your toes and see if that helps. Spread the toes. Spread. Yeah. And then try the other foot. You're going to extend it in front of you. And again, because the foot is connected to the hip, try to find yourself in as neutral spine as possible. Keep the knee gently bent. See if you can spread the toes. Can you spread them without pulling them back towards your face? Spread just straight across. Spread the toes. And here you can feel those intrinsic muscles working. So spreading out the toes is a great exercise that you can do, whether it's with a tool or on your own. So we're gonna let's use that ball that you have. So you could use a tennis ball, or again, a yoga tune-up ball works really well. You could do, if you tend to have a lot of foot pain or foot issues like plantar fasciitis or so on, then you'll want to do this seated so that there's less weight on your foot. Otherwise, you can do this, and you could stick a ball like this underneath your desk and do this anytime you take your feet out. So you're going to start off by massaging the bottom of your foot with that ball. And you're in complete control with how strong that massage is, because you're the one who's pushing down on the foot. So again, try to bring your spine as much in neutral as you can, because you're moving from the hip to the knee to the foot. And we'll start off by getting a little bit of stimulation through the foot. So not only are we waking up those sensory, the sensory division of the nervous system that actually feels this and sends that message to the brain, but we're also massaging out those muscles. Now, take your toes and use the ball to kind of spread your toes. So you can put your heel to the ground and spread the toes against the ball, or you could do that floating and just kind of grip it with the toes and spread the toes. Roll and try to get all into the toes. So if you have any kind of if you roll a towel very strongly, you could roll over top of that. And again, this is something you could do. You could just throw a ball under your desk, or throw a ball on the floor in front of where you watch TV, as long as you have a dog, I guess, and roll that ball in any time that you see it. You can roll out the foot to try to regain some mobility. Now come to stand if you're not already. So we talked a little bit about the ligaments of the ankle. So standing in a way where it feels like your weight is over top of those arches of the feet. So what I like to do is I'll actually bounce my knees, and you ought to feel as you do that, it's almost like the energy, it's like the energy of a suction cup. So as you bounce down onto the arch isn't hitting the ground, but the resonance is moving out towards the heel and out towards the ball of your foot, feeling nice and buoyant. The legs are strong, and the whole body is kind of elevating up against gravity. Spreading through those toes, so imagine or feel those toes spreading to make a lot of surface area. And when you're standing, the weight of your foot, if you imagine my hand as my foot, the weight of the foot ought to be on the ball of your foot, the big toe and the pinky toe ball of your foot, as well as the center of your heel. So visualize this triangle shape at your feet level. And again, visualize it almost like a suction cup. So those three edges are pushing down into the ground, but as a result, the rest of your body feels quite buoyant. Now, ever so slowly, you're going to root down through the ball of the foot. So the toes themselves, they don't really provide a lot of support. So be conscious you're not clenching your toes and you're not putting the weight on the actual toes themselves, but on their base. You're going to rise up onto the tippy toes and lower down. And we're going to try and rise up and lower down with the same amount of, at the same speed. So notice your breath. As you inhale, rise up. And as you exhale, lower down. Only as high as you can, even if the heels just barely lift. Just do that a couple of times. You don't want the calves to get too tired. What happens with a lot of people, especially those who have rolled their ankles or are at risk of doing so, is as they come up, I'm going to do it just with one foot. As you come up, your weight will kind of move out towards the outer ankle, almost losing contact with the big toe mound. So now you're going to take that rolled blanket or take that ball and place it right between the heels. So I'm holding it into that little crease behind my ankle bone. And then as I rise up, I'm going to do so without dropping the ball and lower down. Rise up. Think of going straight up as opposed to forward and up. You're going to rise up without dropping that ball and lower down. If you don't have a ball or a towel that works well for this, because for example, I use a little bit of a larger ball, packing tubes can work really well. If you can pick up a ball, that's great. You can make one out of tinfoil even, but ideally the space should fill, when you're standing without the ball, there's naturally space and the ball ought to fill that space. So if it's too close, you're going to feel really imbalanced. If it's too far away, you're going to feel really imbalanced. So try to find a ball that fits into that space. And again, you can place a ball, and if you don't have a source, I can connect you with where to buy the yoga tune-up balls as well, which I really like because they're kind of hard, but they're kind of squishy, and they come in a larger size as well. So just reach out and let me know if you need some support there. And again, you can place a ball like this somewhere where you find yourself standing, like when you brush your teeth or where you wash dishes, for example, even washing your hands at the sink. You can place a ball between your heels, and as you're brushing teeth or washing your hands, you can work on rising up and rising down, or rather lowering down. Anytime that your heel is lifting off of the ground, we can focus on grounding down through that big toe. One of my favorite exercises to start to engage that are also the exercises that we'll practice today for engaging the intrinsic muscles of the feet. So as you're ready, we're going to come down to a seated shape. You're also welcome to come to your chair if you prefer and just extend one leg out ahead of you. We're going to come to seated as comfortably as possible. So gather close blankets if you'd like to find blankets. sitting up on those sitting bones. Support underneath your legs or your body, however you need to. And then we're going to extend just one leg at a time. So we're working with just one leg at a time. I find that most beneficial because sometimes it's people's first time really connecting to these intrinsic muscles, and it's just less brain energy. So here, I'm going to ask you to flex, or what's called dorsiflex, your foot. So you're going to bring the top of your foot closer to your shin and kind of push out through the ankle. And feel how that engages the back side of your legs into a stretch, and the front side of your legs, especially the lower legs, are contracting. Now you're going to what's called plantar flex, or point your toe. So you're trying to keep the leg straight, so be conscious you're not bending it too much, straight, not locked, and press not just the toes, but actually the whole sole of your foot as close to the floor as possible. And to do that, you're actually stretching the top of your leg and engaging the back of your ankle. So we're now going to do what I call slointing. It's not a term that I came up with. It was the Body Show. I forget what his name is. Anyways, it's not my term. But you're going to flex your toes. So you're going to kind of bring your toes back towards you, but straighten your ankle out straight. So imagine like I don't know if Barbies still have these feet, but when I was a kid, it's like the foot of a Barbie doll. It's like you're pointing your toe or pointing your foot rather, and then flexing your toes, pointing. And when you do so, you're really engaging out through that ball of the big toe, and you're engaging the muscles all the way around your leg. So it's one of the most effective ways to protect your knee. And that big toe is the first point of connection. If you look at the book called Anatomy Train, that big toe is the first point of connection to the deep center core. So we're actually engaging the core muscles as you push out to the big toe. And you might not be able to feel that here where there's nothing against the toe, but in a moment you might be able to experience that in a different shape. So let's relax that. And we'll do the other side. So here on the other foot, I'll first have you flex, or what's called dorsiflex, because the top of your foot is the dorsal side of the foot. Then you're going to plantar flex, or point. Then we're going to point, flexi point. So the ankle stays straight, but the toes pull back. And you can feel, without turning the ankle in or out, you can feel that big toe really moving here. And if we were rising up onto the ball of the foot, this is the shape we want to be in. And again, this is very low risk of injury because we don't have any load against the foot. So it's really easy to practice this as you incorporate maybe ankle movements and so on. So let's go back to foot number 1 again. And I want you to draw some big circles with your ankle. So think of getting all the way to all of your corners. Towards you as much as you can, out to the side as much as you can, away from you as much as you can, in as much as you can. And then I'm going to ask you to use your hands to hold the muscles of your legs still so that your leg isn't doing any work. And all of the rotation comes just from the ankle and the foot. Circling as much as you can in one direction without moving your knee, without moving your leg, and then in the other direction. And notice what a difference it makes. When we want to improve global function, we need to start locally. So if your ankle circles only ever consist of the whole leg, I really encourage you to try to find times where you root down the leg itself and focus just on the ankle. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. So we'll start off with full ankle circles. Because here you could feel like, oh yeah, no, I've got great ankle mobility. Look at how much I'm moving. But really, we're talking about hip mobility here because it's my whole leg that's moving. When you want to talk ankle mobility, we're going to hold that leg down and circle just at the ankle one way and the other. And then give that a little shake. One more exercise seated here, and then we're going to come up to stand to investigate this point a little bit more. So here, I learned this from Catherine Bruni-Young, and I love it. We're going to flex the foot towards you, dorsiflex. And then you're going to floint. So straighten the ankle as far away from you as you can while pulling the toes towards you. Now, using your toes only, you're going to flip them down and imagine picking up a tissue with your toes. So you're kind of going to clench them inward. And don't drop that tissue as you pull your ankle back towards you. So you're going to roll the ankle back towards you. Don't drop that tissue and then throw it away. And then again, you're going to floint out, pick up that tissue, reel your ankle or your foot back towards you, curling the toes, curling the toes, curling the toes, micromillimeter further, and then throw it away. Now you probably have a good relationship or understanding of those intrinsic muscles of the feet. Let's do it one more time. Right, tissue, and throw it away. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side. So let's first floint the foot. So you're going to straighten the ankle, flex the toes. Use just your toes now to pick up that imaginary tissue. Reel it in towards you a little bit further, then throw it away. And again, spread those toes wide. Get your floint happening. Pick up the tissues, reeling it towards you now. And throw it away. One more time. Flex, point, to floint. A little further. Pick up the tissue. Reel it towards you. And throw it away. Good work there. Let's understanding and see if we can investigate this point a little bit further. So as you come up to standing, just go for a little walkabout and kind of set your, I'll call it like your neutral. How does your body feel here? Moving around, how do your feet feel? Your hips? And then you're gonna find your dowel. So this, I use like a little plumbing pipe because they're super cheap. And dowels sometimes rip my clothes. If you don't have a dowel or plumbing pipe, you can get them from any hardware store, but you could also just use the handle of a broom, for example. The thing about the dowels is the smaller that they are, the more intense this next exercise is going to feel. So this one is, how big are you? 1.5 inches, 40 millimeters. So we're going to place that down on the ground. They're also really great to use for that like massaging of your feet, across the fascia of your feet. It feels amazing. Oh yeah, and I just picked up that other little one that I got from our supplier, so you can let me know. And this one is made of cork, so you can let me know if you need one, and I'm more than happy to order this from you. I really like it, and it's a little. I like that it's more sustainable than the plastic. Then move yourself close to a wall or holding the back of the chair so your nervous system's okay. We're gonna bring one foot onto that prop, and it's parallel to my feet, so it's long way. And all I'm gonna do here is rise up onto that ankle. My other foot is still on the ground. I'm holding the wall, all that we're working here is foot, meet, prop. So what you're likely experiencing, you still want to have the leg engaged as if you're in mountain pose. What you're likely experiencing here is a lot of sensation in the bottom of your foot, which is great. As long as it's not pain, what we're doing here is bringing back online some of the sensory tissues that are maybe offline as we walk a lot on flat surfaces or in heavily orthotic or heavily supported shoes. As you take your hand away, or maybe eventually after a few times exposing yourself to this practice, maybe you're going to take less weight into your standing leg and create more of like a balance or experimenting with balance. And as you do so, what you'll find is you're practicing the art of lateral balance. So your ankle is balancing this way. In our day-to-day lives, we don't often have the opportunity to practice this. And in the yoga practice or other movement practices, we tend to practice a balancing that's very structured and very rigid. We're still on the same foot. I know it's a lot. Just bear with me for a couple more breaths. Come down onto your standing leg if you need, but keep that foot connected to the dowel. If you're working towards the balancing component, allow this to be a full body mobility balance, because it's realistic to how we're balancing in the world. If we were out in the world trying to balance, our arms would help us, our core would help us, the other leg would help us to wobble as much as we'd like here. Just another couple breaths. And then we're going to step off of that dowel, and I'll invite you to go for a little walkabout around your space again. And just notice what you notice in that foot, knee, hip, maybe back, shoulder, neck. Just notice the two sides of your body here. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So wipe that clean slate from your mind as though you've never done it before. Here we go on the other side. Maybe a little massage. Can feel really lovely. And then bringing your foot onto that dowel. And that's the support, coming to stand. You're on the wall or your chair for balance. Your other foot can stay on the ground. For a long time, this is an exercise of your brain making sense of what's going on. It takes a while before the nervous system adapts to something like this enough for the tissues to actually change. So feel comfortable supporting yourself here just in experiencing. We don't need to strive to balance. We don't need to bring the hand away from the wall. We don't need to lift that leg. Just foot, meet, prop, and see how it goes. Watch that you're not holding the breath, that your hip isn't moving to the side, that your whole body is dynamic if you're choosing to practice dynamic balance. And again, we're going to step off and go for a little walkabout and check in with how this is feeling in your body, in the ankle, the knee, and the hip. So what's happened here? Well, like I mentioned earlier, the structures of our feet are meant to be somewhat elastic. In order to have that spring-like structure or the arch of the foot, the muscles want to be engaged. They don't want to be passive, which is what happens a lot. They don't have the opportunity to engage when we're walking on flat surfaces or walking in footwear all day. So what's happening here is we're waking up those muscles of the feet, and we're asking them to come alive and do what they do best. And as a result, a lot of people find a change in how they feel in their feet, certainly, but maybe in their ankles, in their knees, in their hips, their back, their shoulders, because we don't need those structures to do the job of the feet. We're going to practice next what I call walking meditation. It's more of like a mindful walking practice. So coming to stand, I tend to put the hands on my waist just because it's like a resting place for them, but you could let them hang, you could put them wherever you're comfortable. And this consists of, walking is a really complex skill that involves a lot more than just the feet, but we're going to focus solely on the feet. But starting with really small steps, you're going to have your weight go in both feet equal. Okay, then shift the weight to just your right foot without letting your hips come out, and heel strike your left. So it's a very small step forward. And then try to roll through the sole of your foot so that you're going, it's almost like a wave-like movement. Ball of the foot touches, then toes touch, and then both feet are flat on the floor again for a moment, and the weight is equal in both feet. So if you're not feeling that, step your front foot a little closer to your back. You want the weight to be equal. Now you're going to shift the weight into the front leg, ball strike the back. I'm going to turn here. So as you push down through the ball of your back foot, I want you to think ball of the big toe, ball of the big toe, point, point, point. Launch off the ball of the big toe, so your big toe is the last thing to leave the earth. Heel strike. Roll through. Both feet are flat. Ball of the big toe, lifts off, heel strike. Really small steps. You're just going to go for a little walk around your space. Repeating this over and over. And notice your tendencies. Notice as you peel the back foot off, if you keep having to remind yourself, heel strike, ball of the big foot, ball of the big foot. Notice if there's no period of time where both feet are solid on the ground. Maybe you're always lifting off. Just notice the tendencies, what happens in your feet here as we practice mindful walking. And again, this is something you could do anytime. I like to do this when I'm on the phone. But I've done it for a long time. It doesn't take that much brain power. So you're kind of thinking wave-like structure to the foot. Heel strike. Wave-like structure. Ball of the big toe. Lift off. Heel strike. Doing this for a couple of moments and have a race to be the slowest, as slow as you can go. And after you've done that for another couple of steps, just walking, just kind of normal walk, resetting for a moment or two. Coming to seated once again when you have a moment, or when you finish with that, just so that you can notice with your foot in like a neutral place, take hold of your big toe and pull it back towards you and push the other four toes away from you. And then switch, you're going to push your big toe away from you and pull the four toes towards you. So we're starting off with a little bit of help of our hands. Pull the big toe towards you, four toes away from you. Push the big toe away from you, four toes towards you. You can bend your knees, you can't reach easily to your toes. And then we're going to switch to the other side. So I'll move a little closer again, just so that we can do this together. It's not the best setup, but it works. So we're gonna start off with the other foot now. Pull the big toe towards you, push the foretoes away from you. And then push your big toe away from you and move the foretoes towards you. And then we're gonna try the other foot again. So first foot again. This time you're gonna try without your hands. And it may or may not move, which is fine. The intention isn't necessarily that the movement happens. What's happening here is you're sending messages from your brain to your foot. You've already pulled on that toe, so you know that structurally it's possible for you to move your foot in this way without moving your ankle. You're going to push 4 toes away from you, big toes towards you, and then switch. Big toe away from you, 4 toes towards you. And again, if that's not happening, the process is being laid. Switch again, the pavement is being laid. So if you're sending that signal to your brain, willing it to happen, literally that is the practice. Now you're gonna switch to the other foot. Get yourself comfy. Other foot up. Somebody just walked by, they're probably like, what in the heck is that person doing? Thank you. Big toes away from you, 4 toes towards you. And then switch. So I'm not moving my ankle. Switch. Switch. One more time. Good work. And then step that down. Come to stand or put your feet flat on the ground so you can come to standing, or you could be seated when you practice. Again, something you can do anytime that you come to seated. Leave a little bit of weight on the feet now. Rooting down through the ball of your toes, big toes up, 4 toes down. You can look at your toes if they're not happening and then switch. Big toes down, 4 toes up. So notice my ankles aren't moving. As you lift all 5 toes and lower, you ought to be able to do that without moving your ankles. So you ought to be able to lift the 4 toes and the 1 toe without moving your ankles. So at first, if that's not happening for you, try all 5. 5 up. And really focus on like, what is happening here, brain, when you lift all 5 toes up. And then just the 1 foot, maybe you can lower the big toe down once you lift them all up. Maybe you can lower the 4 toes down. So get creative here with the patterning. I'm trying to do on the 1 foot 4 toes down, on the other foot big toe down. And it's really messing with my brain. Try talking and doing this. Oh my gosh, using all my brain power. And then we're gonna let that go. Let that relax. Again, another amazing example. There's so many of intrinsic muscles in your feet. So first and foremost, we need to free the feet. Once they're free, our goal is to allow them to regain their natural shape. So spreading the toes, rolling the foot, giving it a lot of time and thinking the longer that you've been like restricting the movements of the feet, the longer it might take for you to find full function. But we're trying to regain that shape where the big toes and the balls of the foot are spread really wide and then move down to a narrow base. You can Google search the footprints of babies to see what that sort of natural shape looks like. And again, something like that takes a lot of time. It's taken me like a few years, I think, to gain that mobility in the feet. And it just gets better and better. It's like this never-ending journey. So once we're able to find that mobility in a free, non-weighted position, then we're trying to do it with the weight of the body. Then we can add in dynamic balance, because dynamic balance is our first step towards stability. It does require stability, but it also requires a lot of mobility. So we first introduced that dynamic lateral balance. So dynamic meaning I'm going to allow my whole body to help me in this balancing shape. And I'm adding the lateral balance component. So if you don't have a dowel, you can roll up a towel. I've had people stand on a bolster. Really balancing on any uneven surface is going to give you the opportunity to practice a dynamic balance. And once we have, or as we're working, first we mobilize, then we stabilize. Because you don't want to build strength on top of a compensation, where you're kind of locking that compensation in. So now, after we've really, again, this is our whole journey that I'm giving you. So within this 1 90-minute class, I'm introducing a lot of big concepts, all of which you would integrate into your practice for a long amount of time. So we first work on mobilizing without any weight for like 3 months to a year until you feel like you've maintained or regained shape of your foot. Then you'd move on to mobilizing and trying to really focus on the intrinsic muscles of the feet and the dynamic balance. Then after another 3 months to a year, like I say, then we're going to work on strengthening the superficial muscles of the feet. So the ones that connect from the feet to the rest of the leg. And I'll give you a few examples of some of my favorite ways to do that. But just remember that any exercise that you're doing that focuses on the leg is also focusing on the feet, the extrinsic muscles of the feet. So we're first going to talk about a squat. So I'll invite you to sit as low to the floor as you can. So you could use a stool, you could use a couple of blocks, you could use a block. You could just free squat if you'd like. And I'm not particular here about the type of squat that you practice. If you want to do with your feet narrow, with your feet wide, your feet in a V, I'm not particular here of which one you choose. While we're practicing this squat shape, I'm going to give you permission now to come out at any time. So if it starts to get too uncomfortable, you're going to come out at any time. So we're going to come down to a squat shape because I find that no matter what movement modality you practice, squat tends to be present. Some version of a squat tends to be present. So our 3 joints that we've been talking about all along, here they are. The joint of your hip, the joint of the knee, and the joint of the ankle. And I find that the ankle joint is one that often gets forgotten about in the squat. So how low your bum goes to the floor or how close your knees can come to the body, that's often dictated by the joint of the hip. How much of a bend you can have in your knees, so that also might affect how low you can come to the ground. This is affected by the joint of the knees. But oftentimes people will squat and they'll leave this kind of like the ankle out of the equation. So the reason why I wanted to have support here is I want to invite you to experiment with taking your heels as close to one another as we can, while keeping the heels grounded, and notice how that changes your squat. Now we've got our full dorsal flexion of the ankle involved. So we're actually building strength in the ankle in this shape by just that small little movement here. Now, even though the feet are rooted to the ground, can you feel the placement of the feet across the ball of the big toe, the ball of the pinky toe, and the heel? So you want to imagine rooting those 2 places or plugging those 2 places into the floor so that the rest of the foot can lift up kind of like a suction cup. So even in our squat, we can have this like dynamic kind of buoyant opportunities. So now let's move on to our standing shape. So now a little less passive. Go ahead and move your body around if you'd like to after that big opening for those joints. Whew. I didn't even talk about your hips moving outward, but they do. So now one of my favorite ways to strengthen the ankles in a dynamic, or rather in a extrinsic muscles of the ankle, is through balance. So we're going to start with a chair or a wall in front of you. The nice thing about a chair is it gives you the opportunity for various heights. You can hold this back of the chair, it's quite high. The arms are a little bit lower, the butt goes a little bit lower, and then this chair in particular even has like lower parts between the legs, so you could use that. You don't have to use a chair either if you don't want to. So facing the chair, we're going to find our mountain pose, trying to position the weight of the body right on top of the arches, and then engage the legs. So imagine holding something kind of in the back of your thigh, upper thighs, holding a piece of paper there. Good, and then maintaining that buoyancy. So you've got that little bit of energy moving down so that you can feel like you're reaching up. That's the dynamic hatha, sun, moon, opposing forces, beauty of the practice. And now you're going to sort of freeze yourself into that shape and imagine that the only potential you have for movement is at those hip creases. So to begin, you can use the wall of your chair for support. Bring your fingertips to the wall or bring your hands to the chair. You're just going to bring the weight onto one leg and extend your other leg out behind you. So here we're working a couple of different ways. We're working on stretching into the balls of your feet, which feels really great between the toes, and also hip extension, which is not really related exactly to feet, but it's not unrelated. And it's something we lose a lot, because what happens a lot of times is people extend their leg back and they'll back bend their pelvis to get that leg really far back. So I want you to think of like a weight hanging down from your tailbone. So you're not going to arch your back in any dramatic way. You're just reaching that hip extension and then push down into the ball of your foot. Now, keep this shape. So if you notice, our back foot is pointed. So we've got a nice engagement right up to the core. You're going to keep that shape and hinge your weight over the front leg. So use your chair as much as you need to, but remember that the point is dynamic balance of your bottom foot. You're going to hinge as far as you can, keeping that back foot pointed, and come all the way back up. So my spine doesn't actually change shape here. Let's do that against the wall if you're using the wall for support. Same leg, extending out, so come to your mountain pose. Extend the back leg, push into all 5 toes here. Now as you come forward, you're freezing into this shape, hinging forward, and using the wall for support if you need. Only as far as you can go without changing the shape of your spine. Back to your point. One more time, same leg. This time I'll demonstrate it freestanding. Back leg extends. Push into that toe. Watch your hip as it's sliding out to the side. Engage your standing leg. Hinge over that hip. And then come on back up to stand. Phew. Other leg. Choosing which option works for you. So find stability in your mountain. Strength through your breath, strength through your legs. Using your wall or your chair if you'd like. Extend the opposite leg back, push through the ball of the toe. Oops, I did that leg. Push through the ball of your foot. Freeze that whole shape, hinging forward. So what are we doing here is warrior 3. But with a little bit more focus on what's happening in the feet. Maybe you notice a bit of a change to your normal warrior 3. Do that 2 more times. Maybe it feels or looks different than it does typically. And after your 3rd time, we'll come back up to center. And once again, just go for a little walkabout. Notice what you notice and feel what you feel. In your feet, but also through the rest of your body. So first, we're mobilizing, then we're finding a bit of stability in mobilization, focusing really down to those intrinsic muscles of the feet, flointing whenever we're finding ourselves in a walking shape or coming to bound. Anytime your heels lift off the ground, you're going to think of flointing. You should see me going up the stairs. In my head, I'm like, floint, 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 floint. So one more often forgotten part of our extrinsic muscles before we wrap up. So for this, you're going to need maybe a block, maybe the wall ledge, something low to the ground and fairly stable. So you could use the edge of the wall if you'd like. We're going to place the ball of your foot right onto that block. The closer your standing leg is to your foot that's flexed up, the more that you're going to feel this. So we're looking for sensation at about a 6 out of 10. You don't have to use the wall, but you can. My body is standing over that standing leg. And to control the sensation on this leg, be careful that you're not feeling any sort of a pulling in the back of your knee. If so, just keep a bit more of a bend in that leg. The closer you move, the more sensation might increase. As this becomes more ingrained as part of your practice, you might even find yourself stepping past your flexed ankle. So find where 6 out of 10 is for you. And we're going to hold into that stretch for about 6 seconds. And then without shifting your body or changing it all you're going to do is contract the muscles at the front of your shin. So if you need to, you're going to have to step your standing leg back. You're going to lift the ball of your foot off of that block and hold that for 6 seconds. 4, 5, 6. Lower down and stretch into the back of your calf. 2, 6 out of 10. 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 6 out of 10 in terms of effort, lifting the toes. So you're just going to barely clear it. 1, 2. If you're lifting way high, you probably have to step your back foot back a little bit. Lower down just one more time. Big stretch. 1, 6 out of 10. 2, 3. Watch that back knee, the back of your knee. 5, 6. Stepping back and engage. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then step off of that. And again, go for a little walkabout. Check in with how that's feeling. What feels different from one leg to the next? Do the same thing on the other side. So use the wall for support if you need to. Flexing, try to spread as much of the ball of your foot across that block as you can. And we'll stretch. 6 out of 10. 2, 3. While you breathe. 5, 6. And then engage the shin and experiment. Where is 6 out of 10 on this leg? Maybe it's the same, maybe it's different. Back to stretching. 2, 3, 4, 5. Standing leg is holding the weight of your body. And we'll lift off without hinging back. 3, 4, 5, 6. Last time, a little bit of a stretch. Again, 6 or 7 out of 10. Somewhere where we can find functional hypertrophy, the place where our body is going to have the most amount of adaptation. Little step back and 6 out of 10, lifting off. 2, 3, 4, 5. You got this. And now let's go for our little walkabout. Point, stand, point, stand, point, stand, point. This is literally me when I'm walking in the grocery store. In my head, though. I'd like to keep the friends I have. Good. And then checking in here with how you're feeling. How are you feeling in your feet? Certainly, but also how are you feeling in your knees and your legs and your hips and your back and your neck? Depending on where you fall in terms of dysfunction or the parts of our feet that we haven't been working, some of these exercises or movements are going to work really well and some aren't. And there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. So I always encourage you to start to kind of sprinkle in just a little bit of one thing at a time. Give yourself time to really feel those adaptations happening in your body so that you can be very mindful and selective about which are working and which are not. If you were to take everything from this workshop and flip around your whole day to be focused on the foot, it's going to be very challenging the next day if you've never done exercises like this before for you to function the activities of your daily life. So moderate as you need. You may feel, especially if you took part in this workshop, you may feel a little bit of different sensation or a little bit more muscles you haven't felt before tomorrow, sure. But I always say a great rule for you to follow or think of with any part of your body is if you feel it tomorrow, that's great. But if you're still feeling it the day after that, maybe you did too many repetitions, too long focusing on one thing, or too much load. Because first and foremost, why are we even doing these practices? So that you can live your life. It's not so that you could do better squats in the gym. We're doing better squats in the gym so we can live our life with less pain and more movement, less falls, less trips to the emergency room with like rolled ankles. So these are exercises that are meant to empower you. So use them to do so however you need. And then of course, if you have questions about this going forward, you can reach out to me at carly@carlystong.com or through Facebook or Instagram at carlystong. And I really hope that you've gained a little bit of insight into these magical appendages we have at the extension of our legs.